Greetings and welcome to all. I am Hajnal Minger from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I will be the host of this GA program offering titled Healing from Trauma Across Cultures. This event is presented by the International Convocation of Unitarian Universalist Women, or IWC, a charitable organization in special consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council, focusing on global women's rights and empowerment. IWC advances equity for women and girls worldwide through leadership development, awareness programs, advocacy, and resources. Programs have included COVID relief, including specific support for women and girls, Investor Kenya and in India, leadership development programs in Bolivia, in Transylvania, Romania, and the Northeast India, violence awareness and prevention seminars in UU communities in Hungary, India, the Philippines, and Romania, and microloan program in Montandwe village, Kampala, Uganda. To find out more, please visit us at www.intlwomensconvo.org. At the end of the presentation, you will see some slides with the web pages presented, so you will be able to jot down the details for yourself. Now I will introduce our group of participants in an alphabetic order. Please wave as I announce your names. Ted Gallardo from the Philippines. Karen Kortsch from the USA.
Hi.
Ghislaine from Transylvania, Romania.
Hello.
And Elgiva Shullai from India. To set the stage for our discussion, I want to restate a few basic facts. Even though we know a lot of them, but I feel like I need to say it again. I'm quoting from Alison Baer and Roselle Agner's article in the US News, "The history of women through the COVID-19 pandemic will be told by historians as one of peril, resilience, and great strength. Women have lost jobs at nearly twice the rate of men during the pandemic. Women spend 3 times more than men on unpaid care and domestic work each day, and violence against women have increased significantly. In some countries, up to 70% compared before the pandemic. Looking at the resilience and strength aspect, however, I'm quoting, countries with women who are head of states, such as Denmark, Finland, Iceland, New Zealand, Germany, and Slovakia, have been internationally recognized for the effectiveness of their response to the pandemic. We also know that women are at the backbone of the community and cooperation, the community most needed in most difficult times. Further studies done by Harvard Business School show that women leaders have a measurable positive impact on every aspect of life. Looking at women's action, the biblical term Sarah's Circle came to my mind. Jacob's ladder and Sarah's Circle are often used as a framework for how we view ourselves and others in the world. Jacob's ladder represents individual effort in stark contrast with Sarah's dancing in a circle, holding hands, being in unison with those around. This is what Sarah's Circle is all about. With all of this in mind, we are summoning women leaders, knowledge and wisdom to see what we can learn across cultures to broaden our circle of connection and support and to build on each other's resilience. Our guests from different corners of the world live in diverse communities and speak different languages. However, we know that the language of resilience, the language of care and love are universal. So to start our discussion, I would like to ask you, Ted, what did you witness in the past year? Where did you see the biggest challenges in your community in these trying times? But let me introduce you first in more detail. Ted is a pillar of her community, a consultant for many LGBT groups and women's groups, and is the visionary president of the UUs in the Philippines with her centerpiece programs from climate justice. Her words and wordship web are also widely used everywhere in the world. She was a Bolash scholar at Star King School for the Ministry at a critical year in the UUA history from 2016 to 2017, bringing with her post-colonial feminist liberal theologists and the very human and open cultural ethos of Filipinos in the islands she terms the open sea spirituality, I suppose. Ted, I give you the microphone, the virtual microphone, to tell us your story.
Thank you, Heini. If I could ask Sophia to show the slide. Yes, that one. This may come as a shock to a lot of people, but the Philippines has some of these qualities that are better compared to the USA. So for instance, we have already had 2 women presidents. In terms of gender equality, we are high up there. About the rank is number 16. For the US, it's number 36. This is from the World Economic Forum ranking. And for human trafficking, we have been in tier 1 since 2016. The US is also in tier 1. That means that we are both complying with anti-trafficking rules that are internationally recognized. But if you can see the statistics, it's 300 persons per 100 million here in the Philippines. And in the US, it's 3,800 per 100 million. So there's a lot more. The rate of rapes is 3.4 persons per 100,000 here in the Philippines. And in the US, it is said to be 1 in every 5, which is very shocking. In the domestic violence, it's equal for the Philippines and the US, 1 in every 4, at least as far as we know that's reported. And for women who are employed, there's more women employed. 90% of our women are employed here in the Philippines and only 60% in the US. But there's a caveat because 90% includes informal enterprising women, self-employed enterprising women. So I don't know the stats for the 60% in the US, if that includes, women who are doing their own mom and pop enterprises. For women leaders in the Philippines, 40 to 43% are in management positions, and about the same for the US. For our history milestones, we already had women who were generals in our rebellions against Spain as early as the 1750s. And for the US, the milestone for women is suffrage in 1848. So that's just to give you a little context. So let us briefly, gloss over the graphic. And Sophia, thank you. We can go without it now. So although the graphic is relatively rosy, there are still challenges at home. Since Duterte, this notorious president of ours, came to power, there's been a sharp decrease in gender ranking. We used to be at number 8 when I was last of the IWC in 2017, and now we're down to number 16. So there are now less women in politics as well. Women leaders have fallen a bit too. And that's why this whole pandemic has been mismanaged. We are just peaking at this moment. Women in the informal sector are still unprotected, but the enterprising women continue to persist in their mom and pop stores. Advertising on Facebook Marketplace, we're selling in a highly unregulated environment. Lesbians are suffering, feeling stuck with people who are unsupportive due to the quarantine. There is depression and suicide, especially among overseas Filipino workers, with many of the suicides happening among seafarers. Filipinos are the most demanded seafarers in the world. A close second are the Dutch. 1 Filipino in every 2 Filipino families are working abroad in highly vulnerable environments for women, either as nurses, teachers, domestic helpers, or domestic helpers, and even men are suffering in working conditions considered to be for female. The so-called feminine jobs are belittled. So these are the jobs that are in the care sector. My cousin is the youngest medic to ever die early on in April last year as a nursing assistant in London, and he was 23. Filipino nurses account for 4% of nurses in the US, but account for 30% of nurses' death in the US. Even Filipinas who are working in so-called masculine jobs like tech, engineering, working as doctors, etc., they suffer considerably in their work environments. Women are usually misdiagnosed or their sufferings are dismissed and belittled. There's also a macho patriarchal perspective on the, we're talking about the intersectionality, and I would like to put in climate change. And the macho patriarchal perspective is to belittle climate change with the pandemic. It's worse with the pandemic here as something men say, take it like a man, it's just COVID, it's just a drought, it's just a flood. So until now, I have macho critics who say I have overdone my assistance to people at risk of droughts during quarantine. They refuse to confront the greater effects of droughts now as worse than the droughts of their grandfathers. UUCP has 20 congregations and about 5 fellowships now, and most of them are in the farming sector. A drought during lockdown could be deadly. And the macho voices said, I'm just trying to play hero. So only a couple of women have criticized the care approach of my leadership, and only because they have been partisan in the first place. Care for children and managing the home for home workers become doubly hard without water, or doubly hard with too much water, like floods. And right now, there are same areas that experience both floods, flash floods, and flash droughts. So there were 6 churches at first who were potentially asking for water systems. Then the critics came and only 3 persisted. The macho voices told me, you know nothing about farming. Droughts are quite common and seasonal. To my ears, it's like poverty has always been there. Don't do anything about it anymore. This is why ministers are essential workers. We work at the level of care for people's needs, both spiritual and material, mediating where people do not understand present reality as those that needs to be addressed. Part of it is due to colonialism, belittling our own needs as invalid. And this also lets the men suffer further into oppression, creating a highly stressful environment conducive to domestic violence, military violence, and police abuses, and other forms of violence.
Thank you, Ted. I know that the US has its own struggles, some similar issues that Ted presented, and many different ones. So I'm going to ask Karen, who is an active member of the North Shore Unitarian Church in Deerfield, Illinois, a UU for the past 18 years. She has been a member of IWC since 2012 and a strong supporter of its mission to empower women worldwide. Karen is also active in several other organizations, such as the American Association of University Women, National Organization for Women, and National Nurses United, all organizations working to advance gender equity. A registered nurse, Karen worked at Captain James Lowell Federal Healthcare Facility in North Chicago, Illinois, with the mentally ill. In this capacity, she had firsthand experience on how gender inequality takes a toll on women and society in many ways, including mental health. Karen, please tell us, what is your experience of the pandemic in the US? How is it affecting women disproportionately?
Well, one of the biggest challenges, I think, for women is dealing with the shutdown of schools and childcare centers. So children are at home learning online, and a lot of women are at home trying to do their jobs remotely. And this puts a lot of stress on the family because women do the bulk of caregiving for children. So if the woman is working from home and the children are working on their computers to do online learning, the women are distracted and need to spend time supervising their children and assisting them in their schoolwork. So this could lead to women not being able to do their job and ending up unemployed or underemployed. And so I think that's a lot of people, you know, in our congregation have those types of jobs, but other people who have jobs outside the home, women, a lot of women are frontline healthcare workers and work in long-term care centers. 77% of nurses, nursing assistants, et cetera, who work in hospitals and long-term care centers are women. And this puts them at much higher risk of COVID-19 infection and bringing it home to their families. So nurses and other workers of certain ethnic groups also are more likely to contract COVID-19 and suffer grave consequences. Tying in with what Tet said, living in a large urban area like I do in Chicago, the nurses that I worked with before I retired, a lot of them were Filipino, and increasingly we have more immigrant frontline healthcare workers than we do American-born healthcare workers. And like Tet said, the Filipino nurses are much more likely to contract COVID, and that's probably true for other immigrant groups. I don't know what the reasons for that would be. It's probably not been studied, but I assume one of them is that Filipino nurses probably work a lot more hours than American-born nurses because they're under a lot of pressure to support large extended families and to send money home to the Philippines. And so I know that these women are working a lot of hours, and that, you know, it puts a lot of stress on them and puts them at a much higher risk of becoming ill. So yeah, there's a lot of ways in which women are affected at a much higher rate than men are in this country. And even though we are striving for gender equity in this country, obviously we have a long, long way to go. And women still do caregiving either at home, in hospitals, and long-term care centers. In many arenas, women are the primary caregivers, and that is what makes them most vulnerable.
Thank you, Karen. Now let me introduce Gizzy from Transylvania in more detail. Her basic education is pedagogy, and she has a master's degree in mental health. Also, she's a grief recovery specialist and certified drawing test expert. She works at the Unitarian Church office in Marosvásárhely, which is a small city in Transylvania, Romania. Gizzy works mainly with members of her church, and her main area is grief recovery. Since 2014, she has been the coordinator of the Leadership School for Women. She has been present in the life of IWC from the very beginning, and she is vice president of the National Unitarian Women's Associations in Romania. What can you tell us, Gizzy? How are your women friends, your clients, your fellow women congregants are affected disproportionately by this pandemic?
Thank you, Hajnal. About the economic situation, I can say that people still try to survive using their reserves in my country. According to the National Institute of Statistics, I present to you some indicators regarding unemployment to support the statement that women work on the front lines during the pandemic. If we compare the unemployment statistics for last 2 years, we see that the unemployment indicators have increased significantly. First slide, Sophie, please. Here are far more men without jobs than women in my country. Sophie, first slide, please. Green represents men, orange represents women. Just look at the sizes. As you can see, we don't talk about gender inequality based on unemployment. But let me explain how it was still a more difficult time for women. Second slide, please. In the countries of the European Union, 86% of nurses are women. 95% of household cleaners and home caregivers are women. 82% of cashiers in stores and 93% of teachers and child caregivers are women. In the current pandemic situation, women are frontline workers and in essential businesses not shut down during the pandemic. In our community, I cannot say that here are many who have lost their jobs or who have fallen below the subsistence level due to the pandemic. But I can talk about many people with negative psychological, emotional, and mental effects of the pandemic. Our church community has 1,600 members. The average age is over 60. In our community, the over age 70 category became the most lonely because there are a great number of people whose children live abroad. They can only see each other through the screens, but there are still many who cannot use internet. They are the most vulnerable in our community. For this category of people, going to church, attending the worship, is in a way the lifeblood. The current situation in the long run will lead primarily to an internal crisis, a weakening of mental balance and psychological destabilization. In an isolating situation, in a closed physical space, both emotions and tempers can be heated up and control functions are weakened. This psychological phenomenon equally affects those studying remotely at home, working from home, the unemployed, or those who are retired and living alone.
Thank you. Now I'm going to turn to Elgiva. Elgiva is a retired military nursing officer in the Indian Armed Forces and Global Sisters Coordinator for Sang Kinte, the women's wing of the Unitarian Union of Northeast India. She has been an International Women's Convocation Board member since 2015. Elgiva introduced and launched the White Ribbon Campaign in the state of Meghalaya, India in 2014 to end and prevent violence against women and girls, actively involving herself in leadership skill development and safe space for women and girls in the state of Meghalaya, India. Elgiva, what story or stories would you like to tell us from your corner of the world?
Thank you, Hajnal. Well, there has been shocking and immense loss during the pandemic, which started in 2020 and still ongoing with almost no respite at all. India is fast surpassing other countries in the rate of infection of the COVID-19. However, India recovery rate is around 90%. 50% of India's population is in the healthy age group of 19 to 35. So speculations is that the infection rate will be high and remain high, but the severity will be mild to moderate with the low mortality rate. Partial lockdown have again been imposed on public institutions and non-essential day-to-day affairs. Increase in cases is causing another health emergency, serious mental health problems among COVID patients due to isolation, rejection, and fear. Long hospitalization, mayhem of the COVID wards can be overwhelming. Patients cannot meet family members or friends, nor can they see the faces of their caretakers, like the doctors and nurses. They feel alienated and feel like they are untouchables. Not, they are not able to build a trust with their healthcare providers, which can disrupt and delay their recovery process. The recovery phase is therefore lonely. Patients experience life threatening events every day, so post traumatic stress increases. 80 to 90% of India's mental health care infrastructure is concentrated in the cities. Many patients died alone with loneliness and a blankness look, with a lost look in their eyes, and without seeing or saying goodbye to their loved ones. Most of them didn't even have a proper burial. Doctors and healthcare givers and frontliners are also isolated from their families and always in constant fear of contracting the disease. They undergo tremendous stress and also face outbursts from their patients. So many people have lost faith, while others have turned to faith to weather the COVID storms. Over to you.
Thank you. Now that we heard some very concrete challenges presented by all of our panelists, let's look at the actions taken. Leading by example, meditation, yoga, and prayer are all successful common strategies for handling stress and hardship, but our panelists can tell us a lot more. So I'm going to go back to Ted and ask her, could you tell us some success stories of healing? What do you see? What do you see being done locally in your community to help the situation, Ted?
Thanks, Heini. Filipinos usually grow up in households with strong female bonding. So we go to school knowing early on that having female groups keeps us protected and guaranteed better treatment. A lot of our Filipino cultural ethos plays into our capability to make community wherever we go. If you live across my street, you are my family, even if we are in a different country. We take care of others. Loving others is loving ourselves. It's establishing already support groups around us. Even in the US, Filipinos are often protected by police, no matter how racist their culture is, because Filipinos are proactive in inviting anyone in their orbit to their great family gatherings and fun get-togethers. When Filipinos are abused, they usually are abused in situations where they lack community reinforcement. Many of them are introverts and isolated. So this may be cringy to a lot of Americans who feel that isolation and not being disturbed is a privilege that's hard to come by. Having so much space between you and the next person could be a sign of wealth. But our ancient civilization already knows the dangers of such a situation. You will be shocked probably that Filipinos do not have a word for privacy. What we have is alone time, and it's on a very limited basis. It is given as a respect for roles played by partners to each other, parent to offspring, siblings to each other, but it is never guaranteed and sometimes even hard won. Growing up the way we are has made all the stats in the graphic earlier, possible. I grew up in an all-female household with my widowed grandmother as the head of the family, and we were all girls, cousins who were left with her by our families to take care of her. She passed away peacefully in our care. This was in a thriving city where we had a diverse bunch that was more akin to Malaysia than Manila. You will find Muslims, indigenous leaders, Communist Party members, and martial law was in that town during that era. Now it's a thriving second capital of the Philippines. All of us cousins grew up as strong women. I outed as a lesbian in 1993. My other cousin outed as a bisexual about the same period, and she's now a businesswoman. My other cousin, is now working as a doctor in Texas, and the other is an IT support in Canada. In the 1700s, the Philippines had women generals in its rebellions. Now, if your mother is fighting against colonizers who gave you your religion, believe me, it will affect your views on God. You can suspect that liberal religion came much earlier to the Philippines before the US was even a country. Just to let you know, Filipinos were already in Louisiana before it was called the US. They have been sailors, men and women, long before. We were descendants of Polynesians who traveled farther and longer than the Vikings. But instead of pillaging and plundering, we made community and cultural exchange. A lot of that ethos plays into our culture against violence. So we were never flat earthers. And a lot of this because ever since, women were entrepreneurial and enterprising, tapping on their network of sisters to thrive in business. Sarah's circle, as Heine would say. One time, a popular UU minister lent us Filipinas his car as we drove to Niagara Falls, picking him up in Harvard on the way. And he asked me, "So, Tet, how is it driving a car?" And I said, "Same as in my country, but less traffic here." For heaven's sakes, my mom has a car, my grandmother had a car, I owned a car. So I don't know what he was talking about. Apparently, his Filipino wife painted a dreary picture of the Philippines, as most immigrants do, to spiritually justify the guilt that comes from abandoning our country. Or perhaps she was from a different economic class. So, as someone from the middle class, I didn't experience the same thing that she did. The UU Church, though, is most entirely from the impoverished, marginalized, and oppressed classes because most of our churches are in the top 10 poorest provinces in the country. They do not represent all of the Philippines, but they need to be prioritized. So if you want to know more about the Philippines, talk to those who are in the Philippines. Most often, Asian Americans don't represent us anymore. So I'm just saying that we will resume our pilgrimage next October 2022, if you are interested. Thanks, Heini.
Thank you, Ted. What an interesting historic background you've given us with all of this. So thinking of different socioeconomic conditions and different spiritual practices, now I'm going to go to Elgiva to tell us a story or more stories to illustrate modes of coping or healing that she thinks would work across the cultures, or it's very specific to her place. Either way. Elgiva?
So, like I had mentioned, that so many people have lost faith while some others have turned to faith. Well, faith and religion helps with trauma, distress, and mentally make people more prepared. There are positive religious coping methods. First is encouraging people to reframe events through hopeful lens, to see a tragedy as an opportunity to grow closer to a higher power or to improve their lives. Then fostering a sense of connectiveness. Religion makes people see that they are a part of something larger than themselves. This can happen through prayers, meditation, and spiritual experiences, music, etc. The third point is cultivating connection through rituals. These rituals help people acknowledge that something momentous is taking place, as in weddings or funerals. They help guide and sustain people through life's most difficult transitions. People should use their beliefs in a way that makes them feel empowered and hopeful. It helps remarkably in stress management. The fourth point is there are other healing and spiritual support, like to playing uplifting spiritual songs, congregate online, charity and donations. The joy of giving and being a part of much needed action in the midst of peril plays a big role in our healing process. Emotional and spiritual support. For example, our monthly UU women meetings. And like Hajnal had mentioned, yoga and mindful meditation, heartfulness practice, exercise, dances, and other online programs helps people in their recovery phase. Well, spiritual care, it gives us a sense of a deeper immunity and inner healing. Spiritual connection can help us become more aware of the spirit in and around us so that we can find greater clarity, deeper spiritual connect, and meaning in our lives. As we move along our path with ease or with difficulties to find our way, there is always light along the way. Over to you.
Kizzy, unmute, and I would ask you to give us suggestion on how to cope with the difficulties you described earlier in your presentation. Tell us about the strategies that work best and what is there more to do?
Thank you, Heini. Before I answer your question, I would like um, to say thank to Ted. She mentioned ministers. I don't have statistics regarding to situation of ministers in Transylvania, but I know that many Unitarian ministers were infected by COVID-19. So many of us have our own experiences. Answering your question, Heini, I would like to talk briefly about what is going on now globally. During this global health crisis, many people are losing their jobs. Next to their jobs, they are losing their loved ones, their security of existence, their free movement, their health is deteriorating. People are losing access to cultural events in person, great meetings, social connections, their old life routines, their lifestyle, and so on. People step by step lose the freedom to practice their social, cultural, traditional, religious rituals. All the losses processing is called grieving or mourning. Grieving is a natural but very personal, intimate, and unique response of the person to losses. There are no rules, no recipes for it. The success of our coping process depends on the nature of losses, the personality, the living conditions, the environment, and largely depends on the resilience of the person. Specialists can hardly change the living conditions, the environment, but they can help the development of personality and strengthen resilience. According to a psychiatrist, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, There are 5 stages of grieving: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. We are grieving in different ways. There are those who are helped by faith of the others by specialists or by traditional rituals. In a way, we all must become self-helpers. We all must cut a path in the jungle of our emotions and build our own bridge that connects the past to the future. The meaning of the future will depend on the process of crossing the bridge, especially for those who did not have the opportunity to say goodbye to their loved ones. I can recommend John W. James and Russell Friedman's grief recovery method. The authors say that recovery from loss is achieved by a series of small and correct choices made by the griever. I will quote from a book of Dr. Edith Eva Eger. It was the first time I saw that we have a choice to pay attention to what we have lost or to pay attention to what we still have. The choice is ours. When you are stressed or anxious or unable to sleep and a million of thoughts are clicking in your brain, you can try a very simple mindfulness exercise. Close your eyes and follow the path of the air as you breathe for 5 minutes. After, open your eyes and continue the exercise for 5 more minutes. Focus on the path of the air. This exercise might help you to cleanse your brain. We all know that there are 2 important things that strengthen the immune system and that can always be at the hand: love and giving thanks. I will share with you 2 simple exercises. Love Journey is named the first one. Evoke a story or moment full with happiness, satisfaction, and gratefulness. Catch the feeling and go around your body and wrap yourself in this feeling. Then go inside yourself and travel around from organ to organ. Stop at all your organs, address them, and give to each from that feeling. At the end, turn back to your lungs, brain, and end your inside journey with your heart. Fill yourself with this peace we call love. Love yourself, and by loving yourself, you will be able to love others as well. With this exercise, you can build a bridge between your heart and your brain and find inner peace. The other is the gratefulness box. Make a nice design box and name it gratefulness box. Find something every day you can be grateful for. Write it on a little piece of paper and put it in the box. At the end of the month, don't regret taking time to read all your notes on small papers. Repeat it every month. It is also an easy, and I can say a cheap way of self-healing. Gratitude helps us to be emotionally more balanced, happier, and more positive. Finding a helpful relationship with a colleague or friend who is in a more difficult situation than we are is almost healing. The development of so-called social support coping and the personal activity related to it has a health maintaining effect. The mutual help fills you with satisfaction and joy. It can have a very positive psychological effect if you take the time to write a daily program, keep a diary, play games, read jokes or hilarious stories, move a lot, do exercises recommended by specialists, or test your artistic skills. At our church, we are also developing a social network and online individual mental health support to prevent post-traumatic stress disorder for people exposed to COVID-19 and those infected, as well as vulnerable and high-risk groups. And we are working to create post-COVID self-help groups. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, we sure heard a lot of wonderful suggestions and different ones from all around the world. And now I would like to just open up and pass this virtual mic around to each of you to tell us other stories that come to mind that illustrate ways of coping or stories of great strength and resilience. I think I would like to ask Ted to go first. Are you ready, Ted?
Sure, thank you. As you can tell, much of the pain in my country is caused by colonialism. It's a continuous clash of cultures between our colonizers and our indigenous, persisting earth-grounded and humane cultures. We used to live in a matriarchal society, so I really envy Elgiva a lot. I don't know how we lost it. It seems being a Filipino has all the liberal religiosity I need. Sometimes I have to remind myself, do I need to be you or even am I you? When I go to many countries, they don't know you, but they know Filipino. An Iranian has told me that they speak of Persian history with my Polynesian ancestors figuring as blessings. I go to India, they get excited. Oh, you're Filipino, come to my house, we will feed you. That's how they treated me in Kasi Hills. So I once shared an Uber, or was it a Lyft, with an Indian driver, and it was a shared ride. So in the back was a white male. I sat beside the driver in the front, and we started talking about my tattoo, which was in Sanskrit. And he complained that he didn't understand the sentence. And I said, that's because it's in the Nepali language. I got it from a volunteer from Bangladesh who served with me to rebuild some homes in Nepal that were shattered from the last big earthquake. So it was supposed to read, love is life, but the Bangladeshi had mistakenly written, forehead is life. And so there's a slight correction to make it look the way it's supposed to look. Anyway, the Indian asked me, are you a nurse? And, I think he was just kidding, so because this is the stereotype in America. And I wasn't really mad at him because I know we have a lot in common. So I wasn't quite insulted. And I simply retorted, why? Are you a mathematician? And I hope you all know that Indians and Arabs invented the global number system, right? So we both laughed and got past it, as we often do with people who have so much more to share with us, their cultural sensibilities, their ethos, their great food, and their rich heritage. Unlike some of our colonizers who can only pass on consumerist culture and fake food, So we will not fight other cultures for more gaslighting. That system is built on scarcity and a general lack of trust that sometimes we say is meritocracy. We are fighting for our own rich cultural heritage, permission to let our humane cultural ethos persist. Our healing is going back to our gratitude, as Gizi said, for the things passed down to us by our ancestors, those that persist because they are about life and the creation of abundance where needs are met. This is what healing-centered care is about. We don't just heal from our traumas, but from the systems that made them not just possible, but even necessary.
Thank you. Wow. I would ask Karen to go next if she would have anything to add to our discussion following these spirited women.
Oh yeah. I think I got skipped over in part of my script. I don't know, but I know that but that's okay. I know me when I'm doing live presentations, I get nervous and a lot of times I'd be glad to be skipped over because it's less time I have to worry about speaking. But yeah, in contrast to what the things Tet was saying about the UU Church of the Philippines, in the United States, generally most UUs are very economically advantaged, and and especially my congregation is in an affluent area, and most of the people in the congregation are affluent. So we have support systems for each other. I had a woman started an online affirmations group in the morning that people can come to before work and reflect with each other. And we had a calling tree where we would call each other and see how everybody's doing. But I noticed a lot of the people I called, were doing very well and weren't really looking for more people to talk to. But then there's always we identified some who did have, needs as far as being isolated and needing people to intervene. So we did have some good results doing that. But yeah, generally in the United States, like I said, UUs are quite privileged. And I know as a being a nurse who worked on the front lines in the hospital, I felt like I was in two different worlds when I went to my job versus going to my church, because I think I'm the only person in our church who is a nurse or healthcare worker who worked, on the front lines, doing shift type work. And like Ted said, it is probably a stereotype about Filipino nurses, because living in a large urban area like Chicago, we do have a lot of Filipino nurses here. So most of my Filipino friends are nurses. And like Ted said, food is a big part of their culture, which is probably why I look so well fed, hanging out with my Filipino friends all the time. But yeah, it is interesting to see the uniqueness of each community, the UUs in the Philippines, the Unitarians in Northeast India, the Unitarians in Transylvania. We all have very unique cultures. And so a lot in our church, as far as the pandemic, and in my other service groups, some of my nursing groups, things I've been doing since I retired is outreach to other communities outside the UU world, because those are the communities that are suffering more, marginalized groups, minority groups, people working on the front lines. And those are the people in the United States who are really having a tough time dealing with this pandemic, because, you know, restaurant workers also are a big group of people who've been affected, you know, by this pandemic, restaurants closing down. And so that's been, you know, a group that's on the edge economically already. And when they lose their jobs, you know, end up having nothing to fall back on. So I think it's good to listen to everybody's stories. Gizzy had so many good ideas for coping and how to maintain our mental health, because thinking about all the effects of the pandemic and working, you know, with people in the community and all these different things, you know, it can really drag you down. And me being retired, I still have a lot of contact with my nurse friends who are working, and, you know, I can see the PTSD from their experiences in the hospitals, and it's very devastating. And even us as the privileged UU community that we are here in the US, we've all been affected by the pandemic. We all know somebody who's been very sick or died from COVID, and we all have know people that may not have been affected directly by COVID, but, you know, like people who have relatives in nursing homes can't go visit them. People who have relatives in the hospital for reasons other than COVID can't go visit them because of all the restrictions. So, you know, we've all been traumatized by this pandemic, and we all need to look at each other and always be mindful of what other people around us are going through and what we can do to support each other, and definitely support ourselves by doing the things that Gizzy said. I know our minister is doing a yoga group online, and that helps a lot of people relax. And our weekly gatherings, our church services, our coffee hours after church, all those things that we're doing online right now are great support to people.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. Then I'm going to open it up to Gizzy. She has some stories of people who showed very coping behaviors that we could emulate and learn from.
Okay. Earlier, I mentioned the 5 stages of grieving. There was added another stage by David Kessler, finding the meaning. David Kessler used to be a colleague of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And I wanted to tell you because I think all these ladies, I will tell you their stories, have found the meaning even in this very difficult period of their life. And I think their resilience is wonderful. During pandemic, I recorded some stories from women who showed me great coping mechanism. First, I will share with you 95 years old lady. She lives alone, and her children live in another country. In the evenings, I usually look for stars. First is Venus, which is also known as Star of Dawn. This has been a ritual since I was a child. I passed this ritual on to my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and I told them that in the evenings, if you look up at the sky and saw Venus, you would know I was with you. This is a wonderful message, I think. The other one is about another 95 years old lady who lives alone, and she has a child in a foreign country. I take the letters of the alphabet and look in my memory for hymns and secular songs and poems that match the letters. She goes letter by letter. And I sing or recite poems. I have no sharp vision. I can't read or watch TV, but I can take care of my personal belongings. This is very important for me. I am not complaining. I talk about my life to my God every day. I'm grateful for still having the remaining strength and opportunity to live a life with human dignity. The other story. Do you know what is the best way to recover psychologically? The path we ourselves cut in the jungle. I could only heal when I realized that if I was not able to change myself, nothing around me and no one around me would change. That was the key to my recovery. But this often involved very hard work. The church community, the Women Association helped a lot in this. Without them, it might not have been possible. She's a 75 years old lady with a very serious stalled grief recovery problem because her father was killed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Such inspiring stories. Now I'm going to go to Elgiva and ask her if she has anything to tell us.
Well, I think the post-COVID self-help group that Gizzy has mentioned is very important to consider in the days to come. And I just want to share my experience with healing meditation that I practice. While in the process of relaxation, I visit and pay attention to all my body parts, external and internal. Admire the environment there, give thanks, and be proud of this wonderful complex system that nature has engineered in us. I spend time in any problematic area. Talk to it like I do to a baby. The response is very positive, and I think that's a good place to start. Thank you.
Thank
Yes.
you very much. I have taken some notes as we were talking. These stories and your presentations was absolutely inspiring, and to listen to all the actions or the actions that we could listen to taken by women around the world supporting each other in these most difficult times. So as a summary, I would like to restate some of the strategies that I gathered as you were talking and from the previous notes. And I put it in two categories. The one is kind of a suggestions for self-care, just like Elgiva's meditation that we can do alone. So suggestions that we heard: keep a daily program, also a diary, test your artistic skills. I've heard the importance of rituals multiple times. and looking to be grateful for all the things that we do have, not dwell on the things that we do not have. Play games, read jokes, hilarious stories, mental exercises such as yoga, prayers, meditations, dance, music. Learn how to reframe events in a more hopeful lens. Look at those around you for positive examples and look at those around you for charity and donations, because helping others help us and we can help ourselves. Next to physical exercise, we heard, and I will add my 2 cents of being outdoors, nature. If you can garden, if you can spend time outdoors, it helps your soul. And then what we can do collectively. First and foremost, talking to other women on the phone, even prayers over the phone. We can help each other because we care about each other. We are the Sarah Circle. We need to create an environment of trust, a safe space where women can come forward and tell us their stories so we can address those stories. We are calling to churches to be more open on sheltering women in need, calling to organize congregational task forces to respond to the shadow pandemic for victims of all sorts and COVID survivors. Connect existing support networks such as the UNICEF Safety Audits, which I got from TED, which are a proactive response to the vulnerability of women even before any reports are made about violence against them. Neighbors give a rating of how vulnerable girls are in their community, and safety groups are created to ensure that girls have support when they need to report something. Men are fairly informed about these networks, and this alone is a deterrent for abuse. Another example that came to our attention is creating of hotlines for women in distress in abusive situation, such as Lila Help, a worldwide directory of shelters. And this is an effort to provide a directory and would be prominently displayed in places where women can be alone. And we are thinking worldwide, just like our panelists are here, showing us the world. On behalf of the IWC, I would like to extend the greatest thanks for our speakers to sharing their time, their knowledge, their wisdom for all of us to learn from. And thank you all for fueling our hopes for a stronger world together. And thank you for listening. Thank you for opening your hearts, opening your minds for our message of healing and hope. And in closing, I would like to just state a few words about the IWC. And I would like to invite anyone identifying as a woman or all women to join IWC Global UU Women's Gatherings, which take place the second and the fourth Tuesday of every month. Since the onset of the pandemic, UU women worldwide have been meeting on Zoom. In times of uncertainty and distress caused by this global health crisis, staying connecting has been vital. As illustrated in the stories we heard, even small expressions of solidarity can remind us that we are all in this together, we are all here for each other. During these gatherings, we will connect with UU women worldwide as you reflect, respond, and check in more deeply in small breakout groups on a different topic each time. To find out more, please visit the IWC website, www International Women's Convocation, or convo.org, and send an email to admin@icuudw.com. And I think Jofi had a slide for us that we can look at, and you can take this information, either take a picture or jot down the numbers. As you can see, the website, email, and join our mailing list. I hope this was sufficient time for all of you to take note of this information. And now that we are here to the end of our presentation, I would like to ask Reverend Ted to lead us in a closing ritual. Reverend Ted, we are
Thank
here
you, honey.
ready.
So let us all come into the space with sacredness, with open-hearted holiness. What lies behind us and what lies before us is nothing compared to what lies within us. We are seeds, and each moment is fertile ground. May I invite you for a moment of silence. Let's breathe in and out for a minute with this short guided meditation while holding a part of our body. Could be our lap, our hand, our arm, our shoulder, and just breathe in and out. In and out. Every moment is a chance for freedom. Breathe it in and out. Every moment is a chance to let in this. This. You have all of the universe in a moment. Breathe in and out. May this be a seed of possibility. This stillness, full of life in its stillness. In and out. Infinity in a grain of sand, in a moment of time. In a millisecond, breathing in and out. In, out, deep, slow, calm, ease, smile, release. Present moment, wonderful moment. So now may I give you all the benediction? As we, if you are so willing, please put your palms together like this in the Buddhist tradition. May all that is in you be kind to you. May all that is in you forgive you. May all that is in you strengthen you. May all that is in you help you rest. May all that is in you be thanked and be loved and be graciously accepted by you.